Hi, I'm Kat, and this is not the video that I thought I would be posting this week. I had a vlog planned. If you saw my previous video, you know that I was intending on participating in the Reading Rush, which is a readathon, and I did. But then as the week went on, especially on the last day of the Reading Rush, there were some problems brought to light. The big thing that was criticized was the fact that this year the Reading Rush had a group book. So if you don't know what it was this, Such a Fun Age by Kylie Reed. And I saw their post announcing that this would be a group book, and I don't know if this was something that was highly requested for them to have a group and to encourage everyone to read one thing and then do a live show at the end of the Reading Rush. But they did it this year, and I think it was the first time they ever did it. I remember they had a poll where everybody could vote, and this was the book that won. So this was the book that they encouraged people to read. But a lot of people have been criticizing, and I think rightly so, that they did not publicize this book enough. A lot of people were not aware that this was the group book, that there was even a group book. This went under the radar for a lot of people, and I agree because I follow them on their socials, on Instagram and on YouTube, and they didn't really talk much at all about this book. The fact that they were planning to read it, the fact that there was a group book, and people didn't like that, and rightly so. I mean, if you choose a book to be a group book, it makes sense that you promote it, and they didn't. On top of that, and this was what made people the most disappointed, me included, was the fact that they didn't read the book. So they hosted, there are some flies around here, so I'm sorry. My window was open and some flies came flying in, so I'm sorry. But they hosted a live show, just as it was planned at the end of the Reading Rush, to supposedly talk about this book. But that didn't happen. You can call it a lot of things, but in the very least, it's very bad etiquette, because, I mean, you are the one who decided to do this. So I would think that the least you could do was read this book. And I have no doubts that running a readathon must be hard work. No doubts about it, especially one that is this big. But it's the least you can do, and especially in today's climate where we are aware so much more of microaggressions, of performative allyship. It doesn't sit well. If you saw my Reading Rush TBR video, you know that I really enjoy them as content creators. I have been following them for years, so I have been seeing them taking steps to educate themselves and do better, and I hope they will learn from this as well. I think cancel culture as a whole needs to be very much analyzed. We are very much in a dichotomy, so it either is one thing and you're holy and a saint and you have done nothing wrong, or you are undeserving of anything good, and I don't agree with that. I mean, I feel like there's a spectrum of things that are forgivable and unforgivable, and I think that as a whole, if we give people the chance to learn from their mistakes and grow, depending obviously on what they've done wrong, I think we grow better as people, because I am aware that I am a better person today than I was yesterday, and I will be a better person tomorrow than I am today, because I am working on that and educating myself to do better as well, and nobody's ever going to be perfect. So with that being said, I was disappointed. I wanted to address this because I promoted this readathon so much, and I couldn't just continue on as if nothing had happened. So this feels better because I still read incredible books that I want to talk about. I hope that the hosts learn from this, that they rectify their mistakes, and they grow and do better in the future. So, a final note on this book. If you haven't read this, I know there are some book clubs that are hosting a read-along for this book for next month. I will try and find links and put them down below in the description box if you are interested. If you just want to read this at your own pace and you don't really feel like you want to discuss it, you just want to read it, I highly encourage you to pick this up. It is an incredible novel, an incredible story. I talked about this in my June wrap-up, if I'm not mistaken, and I love this. This has a lot of social commentary to bring to the table. It talks about our main character, Amira, who is a babysitter for this family, and she is black, and the family that she babysits for is white, and there are a ton of different discussions and topics brought up about tokenism, about fetishization. I always have trouble with that word. And it talks a lot about white wokeness, and it's just so relevant. It's so captivating, and I couldn't put it down. So I highly encourage you to do so if you're curious about this book, because I loved it. And yeah, with that being said, I am going to talk to you about all the books that I did read this week, and especially because I read some incredible novels, some new favorites that I discovered. So let's talk about them. The first one I finished was The Pleasure by Maria Hesse, and this is an illustrated book that talks all about this author's relationship and her learning experiences and her experiences in general in regards to sex and sexuality. I thought that this was trying to be too many things at once. So we had a little bit of history, we had a little bit of the author's own experience, and it felt a bit disjointed. It felt like we were trying to be too many things at once, and we ended up not really being anything. So I enjoyed the illustrations a lot. I have read another book by this author that is about, it's kind of a biography on Frida Kahlo, and I loved that. I loved the illustrations. This, in terms of text, was weak. So I give it 3 stars mainly because of the illustrations. I really enjoyed it. The content was a bit okay. Well, it was okay. Then I read The Black Flamingo by Dean Atta, and this book, if you don't know, is in verse. So this was very, very interesting, and it's not just in verse telling the story, but there are actually poems that our main character writes. So before I give you my thoughts, this book is about Michael, who is biracial, and it explores his life. He is, at the end of the book, I think he is like 21, and we start the book with him being 5 years old. So we follow him through a lot of his life, and we see him grow up. He talks about his family dynamics, the fact that his parents are divorced and he doesn't really have a relationship with his father. And it talks about him growing up, coming to terms with his identity, with his sexuality. When I got this book, I was anticipating this to be much more focused on him as an adult and on his relationship with drag. Because actually, the Black Flamingo, I don't know the terminology, but I think that's his persona in drag. That's who he becomes when he is in drag. And I thought this book would explore much more of that side of him. It wasn't explored the way I was counting on it being, and it's just another part of his life, but it is not the main focus of this book. That being said, I enjoyed this, and I will be looking out for new stuff from this author because I am intrigued and I want to read more from him. I know he has a poetry collection, But in terms of like narrative work, I'm very curious to see him evolve because I really enjoyed what this did, but I left feeling like we could have gotten more. I finished it and I was like, but what about the rest? Like, I want more. So I got to the end of this book very much wanting a sequel. I would love to see a sequel because we left this when things are getting good and so much more interesting because Michael was coming into his own so much more. He was getting more confident in himself, and I would love, and I think especially because it is so important to see like people of color represented, and obviously in this story just coming into his own, but then after it and being confident in who they are is just, I feel like that's so important. And obviously everybody has doubts and troubles throughout their whole lives, but seeing that side of confidence, of knowing who you are, is just so important. And I would love to see a sequel to The Black Flamingo. I give it 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. Then I finished A Song of Wraiths and Ruin by Roseanne A. Brown. Oh my god, this book. I went into it knowing nothing about it. I knew that it was fantasy, and I knew that people were very much enjoying it. I had heard and read a ton of great reviews about it, especially from Naya Reads and Smiles. So I was very much anticipating this, but I was not ready for the journey that it took me on. So, because I hadn't read the synopsis, I didn't know what I was getting myself into. But I will give you a quick little thing of what this book is about. So this book follows Malik and Catarina. Those are 2 main characters. Malik is a refugee from somewhere in this universe, in this country, and he's trying to get into, what's it called? I forget the names, I'm sorry. Zuran. Malik is trying to get into Zuran, and along with his sisters, he's trying to find a better life for him and his family. And then Catarina is the princess of Zuran, and she's just living her life until one day somebody murders her mother, the queen, the sultana, and then everything ensues. If you like world building, if you like complex mythology, think a little bit like Greek mythology, that level of complexity, that level of myths and stories, that level of worship as well, it's this. I know this has West African inspiration, so I am very much ignorant on that subject, so I couldn't pick up the references as I do with Greek mythology, for instance, because I have been learning Greek mythology since 5th grade. But I enjoyed this so much, and I think if I reread this book, I will take a lot more information in, because in the beginning you have, as with every fantasy, a ton of new names, a ton of new concepts, and it's just, it takes you a little bit to adjust to this new world because it is a whole new world. But I really, really enjoy this. This is a kind of enemies to lovers situation, but done in a way that is more interesting. So I came to realize, and I will talk more about this in a little bit, but I came to realize while reading this book and another one that I am not as big of a fan of enemies to lovers as I thought I was. I don't like it, actually. And it's not like this book's fault, because if you like enemies to lovers, you will love this. It's just the rhythm and the tension of enemies to lovers doesn't call to me. And I thought it did, but I'm coming to the realization that every book I have read with enemies to lovers, I have had some problems with. And I've now come to the realization that my problem is that they begin as enemies and they end as lovers. The characters did not spend enough time to be lovers. They had an attraction towards each other. I get that. And we also justify a lot of that attraction and interest in the other person with their magic. I'm really curious to see where this book is going to go. This is going to be a duology, and I'm definitely going to read the second book because I loved where this left off. It is slow paced. It takes a little bit for you to understand everything that's going on, especially with the magic system. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Really enjoyed this, and I'm definitely going to be picking this new second book up whenever it comes out. And Roseanne Brown, another author to watch because I loved the writing style. We come to the first favorite, and that is Hood Feminism by Nikki Kendall. I knew going into it that I would love it. I have read enough reviews. I have had it recommended by enough people who I trust to know that there was no chance that I wouldn't love this book. Coming into this book just ready to love it and not being disappointed ever in the slightest was the best feeling, and I loved it so much, like beginning to end. If you see, like, oh, you can't see that because I'm not opening it wide enough, I'm sorry, but like every other page is highlighted, underlined. I don't really have a method. I just, certain things hit harder, so I highlight them, and others I feel like they are important and I want to bring attention to them, but not as much, so I underline them. It's a weird system, but it works. I feel like if I could put this book into the minds and into the hands of every single person I know, or better yet, every single person in the world, we would be on a better path, because this book just did so much necessary commentary. And one thing I will pair with this book is Sophia Rowe. So if you don't know Sophia Rowe, she is a chef in New York, and she has an Instagram account where she talks not only about food, because that's her area of expertise, but she talks a lot about community. She talks a lot about racism. She just is so generous with her time, with her community. She just gives so much of herself. And recently she has been doing some live shows on Instagram. And seeing those live shows and reading this book was just the perfect combination. I will leave below the link to her Instagram. I highly encourage you that you go follow her, because I've been following her for years and I cannot tell you the amount of things that I've learned from her. And it's just an incredible person, an incredible resource in terms of education as well, in terms of food education as well. So that, first off, highly recommend. Go check the link below, please. Certain things that this book said were new to me. Some others, this book just solidified for me. I knew about them, I was aware, but certain things, very much new information that I am glad that I now possess, and I'll just continue on my journey to educating myself. This book takes feminist ideals and just polishes them so that they are what they preach to be. What do I mean by that? I mean that as a whole, feminism tends to strive for equality. Feminism fights for the rights of everybody. But when it comes down to it, in feminism and in feminist circles, white women are still at the top. It talks about how feminism is not just equality in the workplace. It's not just equality of opportunities. It's not just monetary equality. It's equality on so many other different things. And I'm going to read you a little passage that I think encompasses that beautifully. So the sentence starts like this. We rarely talk about basic needs as a feminist issue. Food insecurity and access to quality education safe neighborhoods, a living wage, and medical care are all feminist issues. Instead of a framework that focuses on helping women get basic needs met, all too often the focus is not on survival, but on increasing privilege. For a movement that is meant to represent all women, it often centers on those who already have most of their needs met. And I think that that sentence, or that paragraph, just explains the whole motivation behind this book. So each chapter or each essay centers on a different topic and always sees it through the lens of feminism, but it explores it in such depth and such complexity that you understand how feminism is or should be so much more layered, so much more complex and diverse, and the term is intersectional. A black woman has the fact that she is black and the fact that she is a woman bringing her down by society, while a white woman only has the fact that she is woman bringing her down. And it talks about non-binary people, transgender people. And I can't recommend this book enough. I loved it with all my heart. Instant 5 stars, and new favorite of the year of all time. Absolutely love this. Continuing on, the next book I finished, and I actually read this all in one day, was Beach Read by Emily Henry. This book centers once again in our two main characters. We have January, who is an author of chick lit, romance novels, stuff like that. And then we have Augustus, who is an author of literary fiction, of just serious adult men fiction. They have writer's block. They're not really able to write as they want to. And so because they are neighbors, they strike up a conversation and they decide to switch styles. And January will be writing literary fiction and serious novel, and Augustus will be writing a happier novel with a romance and a happy ending. I was expecting a fluffy novel, a romance novel, and the focus to be on the relationship of them coming together. I had heard that this was enemies to lovers, so I was expecting to have some animosity there. What I wasn't expecting was what I actually got with this book. Romance focuses on the relationship, like first and foremost, and I don't feel like this was the case here. Like, the relationship was part of this book, was part of the character's journey and development, but the relationship was not at all the main focus. This book focuses on January, and it's from her perspective, and it focuses on January's father, because at the beginning of the book we discover that he has passed away, and some secrets that he has been holding come to light, namely the fact that he has been cheating on January's mother. And this revelation really rocks January's world. This book talks so much more about loss, about grief, about forgiveness, than it talks about a relationship. So going into this expecting a romance, you'll get it, but that's not the only thing you will get. It is supposedly enemies to lovers, and the way that the enemies to lovers is done felt so weak to me. And I feel like that is actually the problem with most enemies to lovers, is that the justification for these people to hate each other usually is so weak that it doesn't even make sense for them to hold a grudge for whatever the reason is, or for that long. And I couldn't get on board with that. So I enjoyed the banter a lot. I really appreciated the characters. I loved how they felt very real, the way they communicated, because it's not like a tropey situation in romance where the couple doesn't communicate. There are some heavy topics with this book, and like I said, If I had known this was the content of this book, I wouldn't have picked it to read in a week, especially in a day. Like, it's not that it is unbearably heavy, but it is heavy. And now we come to the last two books, and oh my god, I've been talking for so long. But then I read Clap When You Land by Elizabeth Acevedo, and I love Elizabeth Acevedo so much. She is such a master at words, and she's a favorite author. Absolutely. I will be reading and loving everything she publishes and writes, because it's just, oh, I have no words. Like, I was crying, full on crying by the end of this book. This book is about two sisters, and what happens is that they don't know the other one exists. They have the same father, but the father has two families and they are very much apart from each other. So one of the families live with him in New York, and the other family he goes visit in the Dominican Republic. What happens is that on a trip to the Dominican Republic, the plane crashes and the father dies. And that obviously begins the families figuring out about each other, especially the sisters, because the older people of the family are aware of this secrecy, this double life that he was leading, but the sisters didn't know about each other. So this book focuses so much, and I thought actually that these two paired very well, not because the secrets were the same, but the way that it explores similar themes. And because I read them, like I read this one day and then I read this the next day, I feel like they paired very well together. But once again, this talks about family secrets, about accepting and forgiving, and just so many incredible things. This is written in verse as well, and this was the first time actually that I read an Elizabeth Acevedo book without listening to the audiobook, because I had it available on Script one day and the next day it wasn't available anymore. Maybe I used up my credits or something. And when I picked this up, I was a little bit scared, because I didn't have the audiobook available, that I wouldn't love it as much, because Elizabeth Acevedo as a narrator puts so much into her words that I was afraid that just reading them on the page and listening like to my own voice in my head, reading them, that it wouldn't be as impactful. But I shouldn't have worried, because this woman can do no wrong, and it's just, oh, I don't have words besides telling you that this is a new favorite. This was 5 stars. Oh, I forgot. I'm sorry. I gave this 4 stars. But 5 stars, new favorite, Elizabeth Acevedo, favorite author, and it's so beautiful. You could tell that this was a very personal narrative for the author, and that she put everything she had into this story. Elizabeth Acevedo is here to just make you think and make you feel, and it's perfection. And finally we come to my last book, which was indeed a feat. Like, I read this whole thing in a week. I'm actually very, very proud. And I read a little bit every single day, and I finished the readathon. This was the first book I picked up, and this was the last book I finished. I loved this so much, and so much more than I was anticipating, because this book came out in 1868. So it is quite old, but it reads so well. Like, there are certain things that are a bit dated, obviously, but as a whole, like, this story, I was so surprised that this story felt so modern still, so contemporary in some of the messages. And for being a classic, You read it so well. This is such a cozy story. I would read it every day before bed. And if you have watched the movie, and that was the case for me, I had watched Little Women the movie first, and then I bought the book. Reading the book felt very much like rewatching the movie, because the adaptation is so faithful that whatever you are reading here, I think there's like a couple, maybe 5 chapters that are not included because they're not relevant for the advancement of the plot, but everything else is so perfectly adapted. The way the characters talk, the way the characters act, it's so well done that I love this as much as I loved the movie. It was perfect. And I really enjoyed it. I gave it, I feel like it was 4 stars. And I feel that I ended up enjoying the book more because I had seen the movie, which is a rare occurrence because usually like seeing the movie kind of spoils the fun for the book. And that was not the case. So I really enjoyed this. And that's it. I am tired. I've been talking for like 2 hours. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you liked what I had to say about this book, if you wanted to know my thoughts on them. And that's it for today. I'll see you next time. Bye.